Chapter 25. That evening, after Matt had headed home, JV could see how tired Rebecca was. "She's exhausted," she sent to Steve telepathically. "We don't need to stay and keep her up." They went to his cabin early, curled up on the sofa and watched a movie to pass the time. "Why don't you move your things down here?" Steve asked as the music rose and the final credits rolled up the screen. "You spend every night here anyway. Why keep making the trip back and forth every time you need something?" The idea both thrilled and terrified her. She was happy he thought things were going well enough that he wanted her in his home every night, even if all they did was sleep. She hoped it would become more, but she'd have to come clean first. That part terrified her. She had to tell him what had happened. What had triggered her intense skin hunger. She didn't know if she could. She'd never told anyone. "You don't have to," Steve said, seeing her hesitation. "It was just an idea." She looked at him a moment. "It's not that I don't want to. I'm thrilled you asked." She paused, looking for the right words. "It's me. There's something I've got to tell you before we can go much further, but I don't know if I can. Not yet." He looked at her for a long minute, concern creasing his forehead. "We can move at your pace. Move what you're comfortable with when you're ready to move it, just know that I want you here." She smiled up at him. "I'll do that. Thank you." She stretched up and gave him a kiss on the cheek before settling down beside him. "Do you want to watch another one? Or do something else?" He glanced at the clock on the wall. 9:21. Still too early for bed, but he didn't want to stay up for another movie. "How about we play some fact poker?" "Fact poker?" She frowned. He smiled. "It's like strip poker, only instead of winning pieces of clothing, you win facts about your opponent. Stuff we don't already know." She was quiet a moment, considering. "Loser gets to choose the fact? You can't make me tell you something I'm not ready to share?" "Loser gets to pick what they share," he agreed. "Then I'm in. Why don't you refill our drinks while I get the cards?" They settled onto the sofa, facing each other, and started playing. "Two pair," Steve said, revealing his hand. "Ha! Full house, I win." "Give it up." JV bounced in her seat, eager to find out what he would reveal. He drew it out for a moment, enjoying her impatience. "After I got out of the Marines and left Tenaha, I wandered around the country for a couple of years. I lived as a loner while I tried to decide what I wanted to do with my life." "Okay, my deal." She gathered the cards and shuffled, wondering if she could manage to keep winning and not have to tell him anything. Steve won the next hand. "My turn, what do you have for me?" he asked without the triumphant tone she'd had. "You know I went to Texas A&M, but did you know I graduated with honors?" "I didn't." "That's a big accomplishment." He picked up their cards, shuffled, and started dealing again. Steve won the third hand, and waited quietly for JV to pay her debt. "Okay," she said. "You know that after school I moved to Austin. While there, I worked a couple of office jobs while I got my business off the ground. In the 3 years it took me to do it, I never had any close friends. There were a couple of girls I'd go for drinks with after work once in a while, but after I left the company, we lost touch." "You had no friends in Austin?" She shook her head. "No. None." "Then why stay so long?" She shrugged and dealt again. She was relieved when she flipped her cards and saw 3 queens. After discarding the 4 and 7, she gave Steve the 3 cards he asked for, then took the 2 she needed. Triumph flashed through her when he turned over his cards, revealing a pair of 6s. She flipped her own hand, revealing her queens, and watched him. "I miss my family," he said. "My parents and grandparents. I've stayed away because I didn't want to run into you and not be able to keep away from you. He looked up from his lap. Her eyes softened. I'm sorry I've kept you from your family. It wasn't just you, he reassured her. I mean, yeah, you're why I didn't go home, but there's been nothing to stop them from coming to see me, and yet they haven't. Matt's the only one who's made any effort to see me. He'd never been here before, but every now and then he'll call and we meet somewhere, spent a couple days together. Our relationship's not what it was while we were growing up, but it's something. She thought she heard some resentment in his voice as he talked about his family. She felt bad that she'd kept him from seeing his family, and the sorrow in his voice touched her. Reaching out, she took his hand and squeezed it gently, trying to make him feel better. I'm still sorry. Don't be. It's been my choice, not your fault. He held on to her hand a moment, then picked up the cards again. The good news is, now you can go see him. Whether it works out between us or not, you can see your family. That's true, he said without commitment. JV picked up her cards and considered them. They weren't much. She held on to the Ace of Clubs and King of Hearts, then tossed the other three to the discard pile and waited for Steve to deal her new ones: 8 of Spades, 5 of Clubs, and the Deuce of Diamonds. She knew she'd lost this one, and she didn't know what she was going to tell him. Glancing up, she saw he was ready and showed him her cards. Ace high, that's it. He chuckled. I thought you had me beat for sure. He flipped his hand over, revealing a pair of 2s. Your lucky day. She sighed and looked at the cards in her lap, then turned a blank stare toward the television. Before I left Austin, I sold almost everything. What I couldn't let go of, I put in storage. I let my apartment go. Other than to get my things, I have no reason to go back. She couldn't look at him, she wasn't sure she wanted to see his reaction. He tugged the cards from her hand, stacked them on top of the deck, and set it on the table in front of the sofa. Reaching across the space separating them, he tugged her into his arms. Come here. He turned her so she sat sideways on his lap and pulled her against his chest. Dropping a soft kiss on top of her head, he spoke again. There's something I should probably tell you, his voice was soft. As hard as I tried, I couldn't get you out of my mind. I've thought about you every day since I left. She looked up at him. For 10 years? No, sweetheart. The first time. Her eyes widened and she stared at him, shocked. You felt it that long ago? It wasn't the same mating instinct we've got now, but there was something about you, even then, that drew me. I wanted to be near you, to protect you. It may have nothing to do with what we feel now. I don't know. He shook his head. Does this mean you're not gonna fight it anymore? Sweetheart, I quit fighting it the first night you fell asleep against me right here. When you moved in your sleep, curled against me, I was lost. Not knowing how to respond, she placed a soft kiss against his cheek and laid her head against his shoulder. She let his arms around her soothe her. He sat, holding her for several minutes. You about ready for bed? I'm ready when you are, she murmured against his neck.